Hey, okay, so I am reading a book right now, and it is called All About Love New Visions by Bell Hooks. This book, um, she talks about so many incredible things, but I am particularly mind blown by the chapter where she's talking about lying and how in society we kind of allow men to lie in a very different way than women lie. Like we both lie, but we find that men lie more often and with deeper consequences. And I was like, yeah, we're kind of seeing that, the ability to lie. And they're just like, they have the impact of those lies are massive. And the ability to twist truths and just say what you want to say with no consequences. And I was like, how do people do that? How do people lie? How do men, politicians, particularly white men, how do they sleep at night? How do people create these webs to maintain power? How do you do it? And she provided some pieces here that I find fascinating. I'm not going to read the full passage, but I'm going to get some of the pieces that I found particularly interesting because she starts out with young children and how they learn to lie. And she talks about how young boys, when they start to lie, it kind of morphs a little bit than with young girls when they lie. So, for many young males, the earliest experience of power over others comes from the thrill of lying to more powerful adults and getting away with it. Lots of men shared with me that it was difficult for them to tell the truth if they saw that it would hurt a loved one. Significantly, the lying many boys learn to do to avoid hurting mom or whomever becomes so habitual that it becomes hard for them to distinguish a lie from the truth. This behavior carries over into adulthood. So we start with boys not wanting to hurt someone, and so saying, okay, well, it's okay to lie or to fib or to omit information if that kind of protects that person. But then she continues on to talk about this idea that when they do lie as they get older, they're forgiven for it. They tell a little fib here or a little there. And there's this idea that the very concept of being a man and a real man has always implied that when necessary, men can take action that breaks the rules, that it is above the law. Patriarchy tells us daily through movies, television, and magazines that men of power can do whatever they want, that it's this freedom that makes them men. The message given males is that to be honest is to be soft. The ability to be dishonest and indifferent to the consequences makes a male hard, separates the men from the boys. So we see this idea that they can lie and it's fine because that's what real men do. Real men manipulate and maintain power. And we see she continues down and references another book that talks about how from the moment little boys are taught they should not cry or express hurt, feelings of loneliness or pain, that they must be tough. They are learning how to mask true feelings. In worst case scenarios, they're learning how to not feel anything. These lessons are usually taught to the males by other males and sexist mothers. Even boys raised in the most progressive, loving households where parents encourage them to express emotions learn a different understanding about masculinity and feelings on the playground, in the classroom, playing sports, or watching television. They may end up choosing patriarchal masculinity to be accepted by other boys and affirmed by male authority figures. And I see that, right, where we see we're trying to raise our boys, they can cry, they can have emotions, they can have feelings. But if we as a society are creating this environment where, like, Yeah, in your house you can, but outside you can't. And I know that there's a shift happening, and yet at the same time, it feels like in our country we're almost going backwards with a lot of that, where it is be hard, be tough, don't be vulnerable. And if you're looking at the people that are in power right now, particularly the men that are in power, they this is that, right? Lying for power, lying because they don't know what is true anymore. If you don't have, like she explains it here, where it's like, even though we learn to, so when we learn to use language as boys, we very quickly learn how to conceal ourselves through language. We learn to master language so that we can control the world around us. Even though we learn to blame others for our unhappiness and misery in relationships, we also know that some unspoken level how our masculinity has been limited and uninjured as we touch the hurt and pain of realizing how little we seem to feel about anything. Estrangement from feelings makes it easier for men to lie because they're often in a trance state, utilizing survival strategies of asserting manhood as they learned as boys. This inability to connect with others carries with it an inability to assume responsibility for causing pain. You're completely disconnected from your internal emotions. You have no idea what that pain and vulnerability is, because the moment you open that up, it starts to touch on the fact that you were not allowed to feel pain or sadness or vulnerability. You go, ew, I don't want to feel that, gross. And so you disconnect from your humanity. You disconnect from your vulnerability. And this denial is most evident in cases where men seek to justify extreme violence towards the less powerful, usually women, by suggesting that they are the ones who really are victimized by females. You can't get in touch with your emotions, because if you do, you have a whole lifetime of pain and sadness and hurt and this lack of acceptance for one's true self, because they're too busy being manly men. And so you have to maintain that inability to connect with it becomes this, then I can do what I want. It creates this hardness, like this, and it just keeps going, where we talk about patriarchal masculinity requires of boys and men not only that they see themselves as more powerful and superior to women, but that they do whatever it takes to maintain their controlling position. So if we're seeing this, I think we talks about toxic masculinity. I think in a way we're just talking about the extreme of patriarchal masculinity. We're talking about this idea that they say, okay, I don't know how to connect my emotions, and it's not my fault. There's nothing wrong with me. It's you. You did it. It's your fault. You're making me do these things. And I think, to me, like that, I'm looking at these grown men that are destroying lives left and right, and they're like, I wonder what they do at night. I wonder what they talk about. I wonder what people that just have no connection to their humanity, to their vulnerability, to the idea of pain and this quiet ache that would be there. And she's like, we're built that way. Men are built, as a society, we build them to be like this. Like it, and to maintain this patriarchy, it has to stay this way. Like, to maintain the systems that exist right now, we have to maintain this hard connection from sadness or hurt. And we see it in messaging and movies and television. It's this idea, and it just keeps going, right? And I think that the one little part that I see that is fascinating. So she kind of talks about all these pieces of how society builds this. And then you see some men that don't want to be that way, that want to change it, that want to be vulnerable. And we call that loving justice. And the one little bit that I liked here that is a big commitment to make is when a man has decided to love manhood. Let's start with this part here first. Loving justice between a man and a woman, or between a man and the world around him, does not stand a chance when other men's manhood matters more. When a man has decided to love manhood more than justice, there are predictable consequences in all his relationships with women. Yearning to live as a man of conscience means deciding that your loyalty for the people whom you love is always more important than whatever lingering loyalty you may sometimes feel to other men's judgment of your manhood. So, as a man, if you are going to connect with these feelings and have the possibility of the other men around you giving you crap, making fun of you, calling you a wussy, calling you weak, calling you whipped, calling you whatever, like, if we look at the unpacking of that and we look at, if that's the extreme, if we look at politicians that are taking at the top of their capacity to just manipulate and maintain the power structures and keep this patriarchal system in place, and then we see that ripple down through our societies where these relationships, even the most intimate relationships, men are lying. Not all men, but all men. Right? Because we're maintaining it through our relationships. And so if you are trying to understand how are they that way, you start with that young. You start with a disconnection of self. And then you do whatever you can to maintain it. And if you don't want to do that, and you have to do the process of peeling back those layers of armor and protection to be vulnerable, and that's hard, because I think for a lot of men, she comments on this, where like, if men start to do that, women need to be ready to hold them in that. When they have destructive and hurtful mindsets, and they start to come back from it, and they start realizing, oh, that doesn't feel right, or like, oh, this doesn't align with who I am as a person, and they start to open up a little bit, we need to be ready to take them in. We need to be able to hold them in that, because that is an incredibly scary and vulnerable, literally is vulnerability. And like, that's hard, because obviously if you have people around you that have hurt other people through these closed, rigid mindsets of what the patriarchy is and what real men are, and women that also perpetuate that. And then they start to say like, oh, I want to be better. I want to feel. It's going to take a minute. It's going to be a process of acceptance and frustration and maybe even rage. A healthy, safe rage, not a violent rage. Shouldn't, like, I don't know what that looks like. I'm not a man, I'm not a grown man who's created a narrative. I have just always been the person that like watched and studied and said, how did we get here? And so I love this book, and I love what she's talking about. Is literally all about love. She literally finds a way to say like, okay, in the end, like, if we all want love, but we find these systems and processes that keep us away from it, if we find a way to have a society that is built on the fact that we do not seek love, that love is not at the center, but that power and manipulation is, then yeah, we're going to be very lost. So I don't know if all of that makes sense or if this connects with you, but I'm just loving this book, and I'm just seeing all these connections and these like, oh, okay. So yeah. There we go. I hope you're having a good day. And if you like this, let me know, and maybe I'll read another part from the book.